Welcome everyone to another amazing, or what will be a amazing episode of Across the Pond. Um, it's it's gonna be a good one. We're talking Tartaria, or Tartaria, or however you wanna call it. It's gonna be absolutely epic. But before we get into it, let's get some plugging out the way, so I don't have to do it at the end. If you like Across the Pond, if you want to support us, if you want to step into the shadows with Across the Pond, the podcast that dares to uncover the mysteries lurking beyond the veil of reality, leave a thumbs up on the video, leave something nice in the comments, subscribe to our channel, subscribe to us on Spreaker, of course, because that's where, it's the hosts, that's the hub of everything audio. With all that plugging done, let's get into it. I have, of course, the big boss, Dr. Not As Evil. He says he's not as evil, at least.
This guy.
He is with me here today. And our Tartaria, however you want to call it, whatever kind of name you want to give it.
It's a cat. It's a cat.
Yeah. He is part of every show I do, apparently. Even the ones that are not my own. Mr. Guy Anderson. Guy, thank you very much for joining us and for indulging us. I've been trying to get someone to talk about Tartaria, someone who actually knows about it. And you've written a whole book about it, have you not?
Yeah. And I chose a name because I wanted people to understand the connections between Nikola Tesla and repopulation, which took place when Tartaria fell. So calling the book Tesla and the Cabbage Patch Kids, I thought would enable people to do that. I also thought that people that associated Tesla instantly with the car, or Cabbage Patch Kids with the doll, would also pick it up, and then it would blow their minds, because it would just take apart everything that they learned in school and everything that they've read and heard on TV, and history generally just flipped on its arse, Yeah. So it took me a while to come up with a name, but I didn't want to call it The History of Tartaria or Tartaria, or I wanted to give it something else.
Well, if book titles could be clickbait, then that is absolutely clickbait. And he showed me the title on the book yesterday, and I was like, "Oh, that's such a great name for it! It's everything, going to both ends of the extreme." So yeah, where shall we start? I guess. What is your definition of Tartaria? What was, or what is Tartaria for those watching, for those listening who might actually be new to it?
Well, it's a terminology that's used incorrectly, but it's so popular now, we're just going to stick with it, I think. Tartaria is a region, primarily. It's really sort of a lot of the northern hemisphere, but more so, it's Russia, it's the Far East, it's going into the other side, it's going into Eastern Europe. So if you think of places like Russia, China, Germany, for example, they were key Tartarian civilizations. So Tartaria is also known as Great Tartary or Grand Tartaria, and in it there are smaller regions like Chinese Tartary, for example. So it's a huge expanse of land, perhaps the most heavily populated at the time in the world. And the other way it's connected, or the other part of the word, I suppose, is the sharing of technology. So this is information that teaches you how to build using sacred geometry, the use of cymatics, harnessing energy through the ether, That really is sort of their ideology. That's spread across the world. So when we talk about Tartaria, we would say, oh well, if you look in South America, there are Tartarian cities and there are Tartarian buildings. There are remnants from Tartaria, but of course that wasn't part of the region that we know, the mass of land, if you like, that is Tartaria. So it's got a couple of different meanings. It was part of the world. The empire we would better know as the Mongolian Empire, but it's also an ethos. It's using technology and building how they built that was shared. It became something that was spread across the world.
Awesome. So many meanings, many things can be attributed to it. I think in the of course more conspiracy circles, everyone knows it as the what is it, like the free energy empire?
Yeah.
The just grandiose buildings, the whole mud flood thing, of course. So how did you first came upon it? Like, what was your introduction to Tartaria? Because it's quite an obscure topic, not something that you just find.
Yeah, it's it's a relatively new conspiracy. If you go back 5 or 6 years ago, there wouldn't be many people that you could come across, even in these circles, that would understand what you were talking about. But for me, I've been looking into conspiracy theories for about 40 years now, and I started off with things like the moon landing and what's going on in Antarctica and what was the Second World War really about, and JFK, Marilyn Monroe, and all of these kind of, I suppose, your sort of your bulk standard conspiracy theories, the ones that everybody knows something about or has an opinion on. But it was, and I ultimately I wanted to find out why we're here, who put us here, who's in charge, and how does it all work. Because I never really felt comfortable with Darwin's theory of evolution, but the biblical story of Adam and Eve in Genesis to me just seemed a little bit far-fetched and a bit too fantastic. So I joined the Freemasons. I thought this way I'll find out. They're going to tell me everything. The minute I put that apron on and I've learnt the funny handshake, they're going to tell me everything. They don't. They don't tell you anything. And I progressed. I went up to 3rd degree, which is Master Mason. And a lot of people think, wow, he's a Master Freemason. But there are 33 degrees. Most people only ever get to the 3rd. You learn nothing. They talk about King Solomon. They talk about the architect of the temple of King Solomon and bits and pieces of history, but it's not really about that. At the level most people get to, you don't learn a lot. So I got bored and left. I just thought, this isn't for me. A lot of people were using it to get on in their profession. Most of them were serving police officers, and it was being used to further their career. So I jumped out of that. I'm reading more and more. I'm now on BitChute, and I'm spending a lot of time on BitChute. And then comes the pandemic, and I discovered a bloke called Max Egan. He's an Australian guy that was one of the first people in the world to talk about Tartaria, and it was him. You'll find him. He hasn't got his own channel, but you'll find him all over YouTube. It was him. He got me into it, and I started sharing his stuff with people. And I got frustrated because no one believed me. They thought I was talking about the Mongolian Empire and I'd got it all wrong. And so I messaged him and said, do you know what? I'm banging my head against a wall. No one's listening to me. And he said, if you just wake one person up, brother, then you might save a life, because history repeats itself. We're going to go through another reset. They'll wipe us out again. Save who you can. And if you just save one person, then it was all worthwhile. So I keep going and going and going. And then I start a Facebook group, and by this time I got piles of notebooks. I've written all of these notes everywhere, and I start sharing my thoughts and my research with people. And there were about 1,000 members of this group. It was a few months old, and then I got picked up by a couple of people on YouTube that had me on. And I looked up one morning, and it was nearly 30,000 people in the group. over 1 million hours of views on the different podcasts and interviews I've been on, and I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to publish this book. I'm going to put this out there, and bang, away it went. But since then, I've learnt more. So if I wrote it again, even though I wrote it a year ago, if I wrote it today, there would be more information in there. Fortunately wouldn't have to correct anything, but I've learnt more. Every day is a school day. So but my favourite subject of all of the parts of Tartaria is how they repopulated after they'd wiped everybody out, what they did with the children that were left lying around, and how they repopulated the world to get the infrastructure back up and running. That became my favourite obsession, if you like, and that is the orphan trains, incubator babies, and the cabbage patch babies. So I think everybody has a favourite, although I know quite a bit about all of it. That is my particular area of expertise, I suppose. How to kill a lot of people and replace them quickly.
That was the fascinating part of the book, is all the babies, all the repopulation. You don't think of that. People think Tartaria, it's gone, there's nothing there, but nobody thinks of the orphans, where they came from. Because you hear about the orphanages of 100 years ago, 200 years ago, but you don't think where those children came from. And these days we don't have them and we don't need them. So obviously there was a need back then. So where did they actually come from? That is one of the fascinating parts of it. That's what I loved about your book, was you explained it all. And I'm actually on my second listen to it in 2 days. It is that good. It is really, really in depth.
Oh, good. It's not for everyone.
No, it's not. It's not for everyone, but it's a nice way to get into it. You get into all the subjects really, really well, and it is really, really not heavy, if you know what I mean. It's a nice, light way to get into it. You don't overcomplicate it. Really, really good.
Thank you. It's for me a sort of a rough guide. It gives people all the information on who these Tartarian people were, how they built what they built, and ultimately what happened to them and why it was all buried. Because we can talk about, as I mentioned earlier, on the moon landings and over here, it's still a bit of a weird subject to bring up about if we want to talk about Princess Diana, or you start talking about anything to do with even Epstein. People will still shudder years on, and 9/11, can we go there yet? And certain things we can and can't say about the pandemic, and so it's difficult sometimes to know how far to go into things, because people aren't always willing or able to hear what you're about to tell them, because this is the biggest one of them all. If you can wipe 1,000 years off of our timeline, make up a load of stories about people like the Romans coming and conquering all of these places and building all of these things, and then sort of come up with really lame excuses why there is architecture in South America that looks just the same as it does in Tasmania, that looks the same as the City of London. It's very difficult to sort of get across to people that what they're looking at is a set of lies, a narrative that's been put in place to wipe 1,000 years and an entire empire off our history books. Now that's the biggest conspiracy of them all, because if they can do that, then they can do anything, can't they? And they'll be prepared to do anything too. So I think that Joe Rogan said that he thought it was a sort of wacky kind of tinfoil hat wearer conspiracy, and it was crazy that people were talking about it. And I got interviewed by someone who's quite a well-respected journalist in what the broadsheet papers over here, like the Times, the Guardian, the Observer, and he didn't buy into Tartaria. He understood bits of it, but he didn't buy it completely. And when I told him Joe Rogan had been trying to debunk it, he instantly said, if that man is going out of his way to disprove something, then it's worth looking at a little bit more closely. Because I think we all know he's a stooge. So, and he's been got at. So, I think this is the most important conspiracy theory that exists because it involves changing our history, lying about everything that we know, the people that we know, the people responsible for certain wars, people who have invented things that have changed the course of history, like Nikola Tesla. All of this stuff is bullshit. And when you can prove it and give them damning evidence, then I think all of a sudden we can wake people up and say, look, this goes in cycles. These resets go in cycles. There's one happening now, and they're telling you, the World Economic Forum is saying, welcome to the Great Reset. You have to understand who's really in charge and why they're doing it. And they've done it before, and it never ends well. So, we need to wake people up.
Definitely. So who actually is in charge?
Well, that differs depending on who you speak to and also their understanding of religion, ancient scriptures and texts. So we understand that there are 13 bloodline families, people like the Rothschilds and the Rockefellers, that apparently run everything. But I don't think that that's the case. I think that they're very high to the top and they sit on the top table, but they report to something or someone. Now, the pharaoh Amun-Ra, he said that just before he vanished, after losing, I think he won the first war that he caused, he lost the second, and said when he fled that he was leaving everything, the power of the world and everything upon it, to the Ra childs, the Ra Khan, the children of Ra, Ra childs. Now you can kind of guess what that name became, and so you've got people that are very powerful that do control everything, and they do it through think tanks like Trilateral Commission, the Bilderberg Group, and they infiltrate governments in that way. But they report to someone or something. And my gut feel is, whatever that is, as some people call it, the demiurge, this sort of like a false god. Some people say it's the Anunnaki or the Elohim, or it's a group of reptilians or shapeshifters. It's something, but my gut feel is that if what they say about the Epic of Gilgamesh, the Emerald Tablets, the story of the Anunnaki, if that's true, and that story is repeated throughout the world and has done for thousands of years, if that's true, then my gut is that they're still very much in charge, but just hidden away. Because someone said this to me earlier on today. How often have you seen a famous person, a celebrity or someone very powerful, sat in a traffic jam or actually at an airport? I'm not talking about a model or a singer or a professional footballer. I'm talking about people that are very, very powerful. You don't see them anywhere. Now, these people are off the radar. We never see photographs of, say, Biden, for example, or Trump out of office, personally, hanging around somewhere with friends. You don't pass them in traffic. You don't happen to be at an airport when someone like that is there. So these people that are really pulling the strings are going to be a lot more hidden than these. The world leaders are quite well hidden and protected. Whoever they're reporting to, we won't even know their names. I don't think. I think they are so hidden. They're in the shadows. They could walk past us in the street and we wouldn't know it was them. Yeah. And that's the whole point, I believe. You've got people like the Rockefellers out there, but they've been given things. They've been given positions of power and land and wealth, but they report to someone. But I just don't know what that is.
I don't think we'll ever really know. Like, as you said, like, there are many names, there are many, groups, beings. There are, theories of like the bloodlines behind the bloodlines.
Yeah.
The 13 bloodlines that we know are, put in place to protect the ones who are, like actually in charge. Because, if those were the ones actually in charge, we wouldn't know about it. Of course we wouldn't. and we know of the Rothschild banking dynasty. We know about like as you said, the Rockefellers, the Vanderbilts. We know about them. We have faces with names, so obviously they're not the ones in charge because they would hide themselves a lot better. Well, like as to your point, like of all the ancient stories, it's a question that I have, and that I've often wondered myself. How far does it go back? Like, how many cycles have we gone through already? And like, are there specific cycles, specific epochs, eras? Because it seems that, like what we know about Tartaria, like for example, the like mountains are petrified castles, and there used to be like these giant petrified trees, and then you have like star forts and cathedrals, but they don't seem to be of the same time period necessarily. Like there is something that happened in between, and it's constantly a rebuilding. Like the star forts are a rebuilding of the castles, and the cathedrals are like a rebuilding of the old medicine homes. Now the star forts are supposed to be like military forts, but that's just because that's what we think now that they are. So in your research, in your opinion, like how far do you think this goes back? Like how many years, how many cycles?
Well, how many times have they reset us? I don't know, because we're going through a great reset now. The last one was in 1776, but I think things that have the word great associated with them are resets, and that's an indicator. But because so much of our history has been falsified, and it's impossible to know how often this has happened, we do know that the first deluge happened with the story of Noah, and again that's repeated throughout the world in different versions with different names, but ultimately they're saying the same story. So that's perhaps the most famous one. We've then got this Younger Dryas period. I mean, that Graham Hancock exposed. We're talking about the same thing there. It's another great flood. But if our timeline has been completely falsified and they've bolted on thousands of years to justify evolution, then it could be that this Younger Dryas period that Graham Hancock talks about is actually the Great Flood, and it was just 10,000 years ago. Then, therefore, making our civilization a lot shorter, considerably shorter than we've been led to believe. So with regard to resets, look at the word great. So the Great Fire of London. The First World War is often referred to as the Great War. Anything with great in front of it, because great has more than one meaning. It doesn't mean necessarily magnificent. It actually refers to, in genealogy, as a stage removed. So your great-grandfather will have remembered X amount about what happened before, because it was passed down. Now his son, your grandfather, is going to know a little bit less, because it's lost. Not all of it would have been handed over. Some of it might have been fabricated, and some forgotten. So each time you move through your family tree and you see the word great, you're losing a chunk of history along with it. So within just a few generations, you can completely change people's mindset, their own historical narrative, what their brain's telling them. Well, my granddad in the Second World War was a squadron leader in the Royal Air Force, and he flew a Spitfire, blah, blah, blah. I tell my children that he's now a wing commander that was involved in the Dam Busters. Their children can't remember what war it was, but they remember it was probably when Grandad was a baby or something like that, and it had something to do with Germany. And it goes. So I think that these great resets are not just great because they're magnificent. They're great because that's another generation that's going to remove itself out of history, so you can start again. So the other thing that you asked was the buildings themselves, and some appear to have been melted. We've got giant trees that they claim are rock formations that are natural, and they're clearly not. So with regard to those, the place has been scorched. I think on numerous occasions they have used direct energy weapons, or we've had mass eruptions, tectonic plates moving. There's been a lot of electromagnetic energy, plasma events and so on that have caused damage. And I think these are all purposely done. I don't think these are naturally occurring. So they melt the place. Every now and again they'll melt it. If there's somewhere they miss off the list, they'll cause a war there to go and flatten it. And then we build on top of these old structures. And the reason we do that is because, one, that people will remember there was something there. So let's take, for example, a star fort. That's a very good example. We've got a star fort, or the pyramids in Giza. We've now recently on the news heard people talking about the buildings actually being a lot deeper into the ground than we thought, and that there's energy being shown there, that it's harnessing power. So this is all stuff that we already knew, that we've been saying for a long time. So my feeling is that they're building these structures on top of much older structures. And the further things have been buried into the mud, the more there is underground. We're told there's maybe a basement or two or a couple of lower levels, but the parasites, the people in charge, the people that really do run everything, they're the ones that have the access to what's underneath. So I think we only see the tip, literally, of the iceberg. They're rebuilding time and time again on top of much older buildings because the technology is there. And this could be Atlantean that we're talking about. It could be Anunnaki, Egyptian, whatever you want to call it. It's ancient technology, antiquitech, harnessing incredible power, lining with constellations, sat on a literally the Earth's grid of power. They're harnessing enough power to do pretty much whatever you want. So that's my belief, that they constantly build on top of these older structures. How far back they go, my guess is right to the very beginning.
Why would there be a need for constant resets? Because what history has taught us, and what we are seeing right now, is that a reset has to happen if they are, whoever the elusive they might be, when they are losing control. That's exactly what we are seeing now. Like you mentioned the whole pandemic, and how about you started seeing things and looking things up and stumbling into things. I've spoken to so many people, like dozens of people on my own channel, for whom the pandemic, or whatever it actually was a wake-up call. So yeah, of course there's a need for a reset. They're losing control, absolutely. But why in the past? Like, if we're looking, the Second World War obviously was a reset, or a reordering of the world. Certain things had to change, certain people had to move, certain people had to go, but we can't just do that. We need an excuse. So war is a pretty good excuse, and it's incredibly profitable as well. Two birds, one stone. But like, if we're talking like 1700s, 1600s, even, like, what was happening then? Not a whole lot. Like, yeah, we had the industrial age, which was incredibly profitable for, the factory owners, the machine owners. We had the Renaissance, the Age of Enlightenment. I mean, still, that wasn't such a big threat. So I'm just wondering, like, if it goes back all the way to the beginning, how did they keep losing control, or were there other other things that were happening, other excuses that they had for those resets? Like, I'm just kind of trying to think logically, because if we're talking, like, I don't know, medieval serfs, like, what power did they have? Why would that need to be reset? There wasn't much happening, not here in Europe at least. In Arabia there was a lot happening. Science was booming a lot, but there wasn't really a reset going on in Arabia. Or are there different resets throughout the world?
So that's such a good question. The bottom line is that you're basing everything upon the timeline as we know it now. So you referred to the Middle Ages and the Dark Ages, and famously known as being a period of time where not really much happened. It's because it never existed. Yeah. They've padded out everything. If you look at how evolution works with regard to technology, we go from horse and buggy, horse and cart, very, very, very basic technology, to all of a sudden, you mentioned the Industrial Revolution. Within just a few years of us being very, very primitive, we invent everything. Everything happens. We see the steam train, we see steamships, people start talking about world travel, there are zeppelins up in the sky, airships, people are starting to travel around the world, we're building lighthouses to guide. Then we very quickly move into the discovery of electricity. Then we have, from nowhere, we start having global communication, and then you've got someone like Nikola Tesla, suddenly trying to look at, not only have we only had electricity around for a few years, but now we're going to try and wirelessly transmit it across the world. We've then got radar and everything else that came along after that, with television and then ultimately the internet and what have you. So that all happens from nothing. We go from a standing start with very basic infrastructures in place, where our only method of communication is to send a courier or a pigeon to carry information from one place to another, to within a few years being able to get information sent quickly anywhere in the world, and to now it being instantaneously. So if you look at technology and the progression of it, it goes from nothing to everything within just a few years, literally a couple of decades. Everything's changed. So that in itself is strange. So first of all, you've got to look at the timeline, and there's someone called Anatoly Fomenko. Now, his work is worth looking at. It's in depth, but he studied chronology. He's proven that carbon dating is incorrect. Everything about our chronology is wrong, and he guesses 1,000 years added to our timeline. At the same time, a lot of people refer to the Tartarian Empire, which was at its peak 1,000 years, where we built these incredible buildings. Everything was done in balance and understanding cymatics and frequency. We were harnessing energy. There was no money. Everything was done barter and trade. And there was peace. Peace for 1,000 years. They'll refer to that as being the millennial reign of Christ. 1,000 years where Christ reigned, as predicted. But the deal was, now who put this deal together? They say it's the gods. The gods agreed this. With the bad gods and the good gods, these higher beings put an agreement in place that they would allow Christ to reign for 1,000 years. But after that, they would be given a 250-year period called Satan's little season. And that's evident if you look at the Statue of Liberty, where you've got Lucifer stood there on top of a star fort with a broken chain around his ankle, holding that book that says 1776. As it's there for anybody to see. Then the back of the American dollar bill, the all-seeing eye above the pyramid with New World Order in Latin and in Roman numerals 1776. That was the beginning of New World Order. We're in it now. Satan's little season. And the reason that they were given this 250-year period to trash the place, to literally flatten slowly the earth, is one, the deal apparently, according to people that research, is far greater than I do. If they hadn't have agreed to this 250-year period of these parasites coming out and doing this damage, then they would reset completely again, and that would be a cataclysmic event. And so these are agreements that they're allowed these short periods of time or these long periods of time, and it was predetermined right from the start. By who and by what, I don't know. But I'm bombarded with this. Every time I talk about the Tartarian Empire, I'm corrected. It's the millennial reign of Christ. We are in Satan's little season. Well, that in theory should end on the 4th of July next year. That will be 250 years from the last reset, the beginning of New World Order. Will it? I don't know. What will happen between now and then? I don't know. But things are heating up. People can feel it. There's something isn't quite right. Something's going to break. But maybe this reset, and maybe, as you said about the pandemic being a test, maybe this reset is actually to see who is ready to move to the next stage and who has to stay behind.
Definitely with the COVID thing, that was a test. That was a test of control to see how long we could be fully controlled for, how long they could keep us sealed in our own little units for.
Sorry, by test what I meant was who complied, who went willingly and rolled up a sleeve, who complied and who questioned it. Was that the test? Who is awake? Who's ready to hear what really is going on? Because it sure as hell can't be the person that's totally up to date with all of their recent boosters. It would be pointless hitting them with this information because they're not going to believe it. But the ones who from the very start said, I'm not complying, this isn't right, there's something very, very nefarious going on here, we're being lied to, I think that there's an agenda at play. Those people might just be the ones that are being watched. So that, I think, may be the test. Who complies, who doesn't? As you quite rightly said, who's going to follow the rules? Who's going to stay indoors and lock themselves in? And who's going to say no? And who's going to go one stage further and go out there and start shouting something's wrong? Now, what if that test was put in place by the good guys? They want to see who can go with them to the next stage after this reset and who couldn't. Because like people have said over the years, and Stephen Hawking used to say this, the reason we never have a UFO, I don't believe any of this, by the way, but the reason we don't have a UFO land and they all jump out and say, hi, everyone, we're from Mars, is because our natural reaction would be to try and kill them or shoot them out of the sky.
Yeah.
So they're not going to make themselves present to everybody. They're probably only going to look at the ones that are more susceptible to take this information in and understand what's going on. So all I'm throwing into the hat is it possible that that was a test, but actually for a very different reason? Who's coming? Who's going to come with us past this next reset? Who are we taking underground? Who are we taking beyond the ice walls? Who are we taking to Mars? Because we sure as hell can't take this lot of people because they're not free thinkers. We need to take the ones that are more likely to understand what's going on and why.
Definitely. It just makes you think, doesn't it? It's like there's a battle of two sides going on, and who's who and who's where, and we as normal people, we don't know what is going on. We're just like caught in the middle, being pulled one way or the other. And I think a lot of people during COVID, during that time, did wake up because they had a lot of time to sit, to think, to be in themselves instead of being bombarded by the outside world. They had themselves, their own minds, and I think that woke a lot of people up during that time.
But my kind of theory was that the reason I got sort of banned from Facebook quite quickly in 2020 was, although I've been putting stuff out there for a long time, but I started to say some things that apparently I shouldn't have said. And my first one was, how come in the town where I live, they installed a 5G mast faster than they could provide me with a medical intervention? How is that possible? The first and most important thing that happened in England was to install 5G masts in as many places as possible. And how come I can stand next to one and not get a signal? So that's my first question is, why was that of more concern? And they said, well, they wanted an infrastructure so people could work remotely, so people would have an internet connection if they were working from home. Well, most people that had the ability to work from home, where they had a job that would allow that, had something called the internet. So why would we need to access it through 5G on a mobile phone when the chances are you've got broadband phone line in place anyway? Because if you're doing a sort of job where you're sat on a laptop all day, you've probably got the internet in your house. So that just didn't stack up. My wife and I then went to London. We went to the city to have a little snoop around, and the whole place was being rebuilt. There were workmen everywhere. They were all Chinese. Even the equipment being used, the machinery, was all Chinese. But they were building. They were building and building. Building was allowed to continue. It was about the only thing that was. And everybody else had to stay indoors. So, when I started questioning that this pandemic is not about a virus. That's just part of this. This is actually about something a lot bigger than that. They're going to now start using, I believe, the frequencies emitted, these EMF, to damage people, weaken their immune system, change their vibration, their frequency, keep them in a low state, perhaps cause things that have an effect to their respiratory system. So they think they've got something called long COVID, when actually they've just cranked the mast up to a certain frequency, so you're short of breath. And maybe to the point where if a group of people gathered in one area to protest, they could use it for crowd control. So I think actually that was an opportunity for them to install these masts everywhere without anybody wondering what was going on or even noticing them doing it.
I don't know if you saw it, Guy. Sorry to interrupt you, but in Croatia there was a mass protest. I think it was Croatia a couple of months ago.
Yeah, I know which one you're going to talk about.
Yeah, the silent protest, and then all of a sudden the crowd sort of like moves and there's a noise that comes through. Is that the kind of thing you think it will be?
Yeah.
From these masks, yeah.
Yeah, I think so. Now, what that is, I don't know, because you heard something, didn't you?
Yeah.
So were they using some sort of technology? I don't know. But my gut feel is that that's exactly what these masks are going to be doing or capable of. And somebody said to me, do you know, if you go up to one of these masts and you try and do something to it, the police turn up within seconds. But they don't do that if you're messing around with a 4G or a 3G mast. They don't. And 4G and 3G were paid by the mobile phone networks. 5G was paid for and installed by the government. Well, that's the first time they've ever given a toss about whether or not I've got a signal on my phone. So I think that they're using very old weapons, Tartarian technology, Atlantean, Antiquitech, the sort of stuff that Tesla was playing around with. And I think it's been slowly released. The deep state have it for a very long time, and then it's brought into the mainstream. So they get it for free. They play around with it. They use it for whatever they want to do. They use it to literally attack us, and then they get us to queue up and pay for it. We want that latest bit of kit. We've got no idea what Bluetooth does. We've got no idea what the Wi-Fi in our house is doing to us. We don't know. We've got no idea what if our phone's causing us any harm. But we'll queue up to get the latest version of the iPhone when it comes out and pay $1,000 for the privilege. So I think it's there's several sort of prongs to their attack. It's not even a two-pronged attack. You know, there's a lot more going on there.
Yeah.
They make money out of us being ill. They take pleasure in watching us suffer, and they're parasitic in every respect because they feed off of that. And I think it's not just our money. I think it's beyond the money. I think this is about energy. They're taking our energy, zapping our will to live.
You mentioned Tartarian-like buildings all across the world. I've seen examples myself, you know, they're either very Romanesque looking, very Greco-Romanian, some, you know, Arabic, like you'll see in, you know, the 1001 Nights, you know, like the domes, like Taj Mahal kind of buildings, or theories that, you know, Taj Mahal is actually one of those buildings. But if the, you know, the Tartarian Empire as, you know, like actual landmass, as country, was mostly just Russia, Eastern Europe, the Ural, perhaps, then how are those buildings found from, you know, India to Africa to Peru, and like all seemingly pretty much on one line? Like you can almost draw on a map, like draw a straight line from like one of those buildings or temples, as they're often described, because, you know, everything has to have a religious meaning, of course. It's the easiest. Oh, I don't know what it is. Looks like a temple. It's a temple. Religious. Done. Write it down. Note it down. So if it's just, you know, Russia and Eastern Europe, then how are they found all over the world? Were they in communication somehow? Were people sent out over the world to, I don't know, like teach other people how to build? Because there are stories from, you know, from South America and all those other countries about these big, like tall, you know, blonde-haired, blue-eyed beings, you know, coming into their land and teaching their ways. There have been, you know, blonde-haired and ginger mummies found like all the way in China. So how did they do that? Or is it just, you know, like all mind games? Or just on accident, you know, everybody just happened to discover the same building style at the same time?
So that's what the narrative would tell you, that it's just a coincidence. So if, for example, you take Crystal Palace in London, which burnt down, which is pretty hard to do because, you know, glass and metal takes extreme heat. We need maybe 4,000 degrees. So the person that designed Crystal Palace in London, he won the job, or the contract, if you like, or the gig. He won that by entering a competition. A lot of these world's fairs and Crystal Palaces around the world, you'll often find that the architect won the job in a competition. Well, the one who got the job for Crystal Palace in London, he applied to enter. Now, he lived in Australia, so he had to apply by sending a letter which went by ship, halfway around the world, or across the world, depending on where you sit on that. Within 2 weeks of him entering, the competition was announced, and he had won. And within a further 2 weeks, he's on site starting construction. So this man managed to post a letter from Australia to England, then got a reply sent back 2 weeks later to tell him he'd won, then got on a boat and sailed from Australia to England, all within 4 weeks of entering. Now, the number that would have taken probably at least 6 months in reality for any of that to have happened. So, and the reason is these buildings were already there. And they wanted to come up with a narrative to satisfy people like you and I that are just going to poke around. But they fall apart once you dig a little bit deeper or use a bit of logic to them. How were they able to build a building in, let's say, for example, Rio de Janeiro, that looks very similar to the Vatican, St. Paul's Cathedral, or the White House? Well, the narrative will tell you it was, as you quite rightly stated, Greco-Roman. It was the style of the time. But how did people in Rio de Janeiro know that in Canada, America, Peru, Tasmania, Australia, New Zealand, that they're also building at exactly the same time, the same style? Well, the reason is our history is a lie, because that's just not possible. They'd have had to have been faxing blueprints and architectural drawings to each other to understand what they were doing, and the other people would want to agree to it to start with. I mean, if I contact another country and say this is how we're going to build from now on, and this is our style, they'll say, well, good for you. You know, we're not interested. Why are you sharing this shit with us? So it's the same people. How did they communicate that information? Well, if you look at what happened after the Great Flood, the deluge, in every continent in the world, people emerged. They came either from the sky or from the sea, and started to show the people that had survived building techniques, how to build in balance and harmony, how to harness energy from the ether. All of this, I mean, it's all in the Epic of Gilgamesh, and but this isn't just in that. It's in Hindu scripture too. It's in every culture in the world. These people appeared after the last flood and showed us how to build. And that is how far it goes back. So my guess is 10,000 years ago they started building these things. There have been people here before that. The pyramids are obviously a lot older than we've been led to believe. There's been civilizations, and they've wiped out. They've reset. And I think that's done, one, as part of an agreement, and two, as a result of war. So I think when we've had issues like, I don't know if you can still hear me, but I think it says it's reconnecting. Right. I think that there have been lots of cataclysmic events that have wiped people out, wiped populations out.
That wasn't supposed to happen.
No. There we go. We're back. There we go.
Yeah.
We're back,
okay.
Well, if you say certain things, but so I think lots of resets for lots of different reasons, but I think they are the result of two opposing groups of people, beings, entities, organizations that are at loggerheads, and they all get their own sort of time to shine, I suppose. And wars have caused, I mean, if you look at the Bible, the Old Testament, you know, this God that they refer to in there seems to be so unhappy with what's going on down here that he does all sorts of things to us and sends fire, plague, flood, pestilence. All of these things are referred to as being sort of a punishment for mankind and its sins when we hadn't done anything. The only danger I think now is with the reset that they're talking about is that to have an infrastructure, they've always had to repopulate. But this time, if they were to wipe out 50% of the planet, 80% of the planet overnight, they've now got AI, and AI can do a lot of the jobs that we do. So they're not going to need anywhere near as many people to actually operate and have everything that they need up and running.
Do you think that was what the Georgia Guidestones were warning us of?
Possibly. And I think that I think there are lots of clues out there, but yeah, quite possibly. And I think that there are people out there that have been trying to tell us that, you know, that we need to look at these things. But the other thing is that we don't know who, when these things are discovered, we don't always know whether or not we're being told the truth about that. Are they as old? Are those stones as old as we've been led to believe? You know, if they're saying something that's fundamental to our future, why have we been allowed to know it?
Yeah, we only get the information that we need to know, don't we?
Yeah, so it's very difficult to know, isn't it? And anything of any interest, certainly in America, seems to end up in the Smithsonian Institution, and then they have an asbestos leak, or they lose something, or there's damp, or something happened and you can't get it. And then the rest of the world, it's in the Vatican vaults, and you know, a handful of people are allowed in there with written permission. You've got to say exactly what it is you're looking for, and then you'll watch the whole time you're there. So I think when people find things that we don't necessarily know whether or not they're as old as we've been led to believe, that they say, I mean, these things are translated too. Do we know that the translation's been done correctly? Could we do the translation ourselves, try and work it out? It might say something very different. So I never know with things like that. It's just like my sort of lack of faith in mainstream science and archaeology has probably clouded my thoughts on any discovery, because there's so much of it doesn't stack up, and they're in this awful position where if they speak out against the system, that they can lose funding or be discredited for telling ultimately what happens to be the truth. Like Graham Hancock, we've mentioned him a couple of times, and he was ostracised. Some of the newspapers and the press did a number on him and ridiculed him. Yeah. And the Younger Dryas period went from being a mad idea that he was talking about in some pseudo-scientific way to becoming fact within just really relatively a short period of time. So I don't know, are these things sent to guide us? I don't know, because I sometimes question, are they authentic? How old are they, and have they been translated correctly?
But in that, or like with that thought in mind, like kind of continuing on the whole Graham Hancock thing, like if he was as dangerous to the establishment as he is, would he appear on Joe Rogan? Would he have his Netflix series? Yeah, there's definitely a smear job being done against him, but like, isn't that also just part of it to make it seem like, he's such a big threat because, he's telling you all the things that you shouldn't know. So he's on your side. He's definitely not on our side.
Yes.
Could he be like, the double spy, if you will, pretending to be on our side and disclosing all these things? Well, in the meantime, he's a regular guest on Joe Rogan. He has at least 2 seasons on Netflix that are still there. Like, you don't get those if you're truly a threat. I think there are a lot of bad actors who pretend that that they're on our side, or that when shit happens that they will be on our side. Like everyone said, during COVID, they compared it to Nazi Germany. Oh, like, I would totally be the one going against it, while in the meantime they're ratting out the neighbor.
Yeah, I agree, and I think there are 2 ways of looking at that. First of all, with Graham Hancock, and he's probably not the best example, because there's so many other people out there that do incredible work, but he's just someone that I think everybody has seen at some point. You've seen his show on Netflix, or you might have read one of his books, or seen him on Rogan. But he's a good example for this point in hand, or this case in hand. Sorry, he was writing about this stuff a very long time ago, and he was holding talks that nobody turned up to. It was a very niche market that he was in for selling his books, at least. But my dad was emailing him, over a decade ago, sort of 15 years ago. They were emailing each other, and he'd reply because he probably wasn't getting that many emails from people. So I think, first of all, there are people out there that I think have been put in place to lead us down the garden path. So you could argue that certain people that have podcasts that talk about conspiracy theories are putting conspiracy theories out there that we shouldn't really take too much notice of because they're not relevant or interesting, or they're setting out to debunk. So I think when you had Graham Hancock on Joe Rogan the first time, he's talking about things that people don't really know about, and it's a bit interesting. Between now and then, or now and the second time he's on, Rogan's changed. He's no longer operating from he started off in his spare bedroom, then he's in his garage, and now he's got a studio in Austin. He made an awful lot of money from, I can't remember what it was, but millions of dollars when he sold to Spotify.
I believe it was like a $250 million deal.
There, so that moment he's sold out. So I think at that point he is told what he can and can't say. So the next time he gets Graham Hancock on, he gets someone to come on with him and try and run him into the ground. And he actually apologised afterwards for being unprepared. So I think that Rogan set out to put him in a position where he thought he would fail, and he did. He didn't come across as well as normal. It worked. So that's why I think he was back on the Rogan show, and why it wasn't just him and Joe talking like it had been previously. Why is his Netflix channel going still? I think they follow karmic law. I think they follow retribution. They understand that they have to tell us what's going on, but they do it in a way in which we'll take it as fictional. And by putting Graham Hancock, after he's been destroyed publicly, not only taken apart on Joe Rogan's show, but destroyed in The Guardian and several other newspapers, and all over the internet, people saying that he's mad and he's pseudoscientific and he should be stopped. I think it was an opportunity to try and debunk him on a global scale, because he had uncovered the Younger Dryas period. That went from being his theory to fact. Anything else he's poking around with, they need to discredit him and do it quickly. Now, they're not just going to go and kill the bloke. I think they want to discredit as well, because if you kill him, then more people are going to think, well, he must have been onto something. Yeah. If you discredit him publicly and make him look stupid, then people are going to switch off from him. And they've done this recently with Billy Carson. He's been exposed as being a fraud, that he's a showman, that he's this, that, and the other. Well, I was watching him years ago when,
so was I.
Yeah, he had, this man wasn't wealthy then. Not many people would know who we're talking about. So what do they do with him? They get him on Joe Rogan and they try and debunk him there, and take him apart, pick him up on something that is just a theory, but something he's not dotted the I's and crossed the T's with, and destroy him. And then everybody afterwards says, well, he's just in it for the money. I think he's been got at. So I think there's pleasure in that as well. But for platforms like Netflix and YouTube, there's a lot of money to be made by having controversial people around. And although that we've got fiat currency and the people sat right at the very top don't need money, their bitches do. The people that report to them do want money, do want power, and enjoy watching all this play out. Because I think the world is a stage, and the people that are stood upon it are nothing but actors, whether it's the president, the royal family, Klaus Schwab, any of them, Gates, the lot. They are actors. They're all on the same side. They've all got one agenda. They all report to something or someone, and they want money and power, because they sure as hell ain't going to get to the very top, where it's sort of inbuilt, if you like. Like you mentioned earlier on, that we don't really know who these bloodline families are, and I would argue that that it's even worse than that. If you take the Vatican, most people consider this man bopping around with this white dress on, wearing a pair of red shoes, is the head of the Catholic Church, and he's not. A lot of people don't realise that's the white Pope. There's a grey Pope, a black Pope. People need to be looking at Pepe Orsini. I mean, if you want to see who runs the Vatican and the Roman Catholic Church and the Jesuit Society, look at Pepe Orsini. And better still, type his name into Google and see how many pictures you'll find of him. If you can find more than 3, you're doing well. If you can find anything on him out there, you're doing well. They're hidden and protected. They are, like you quite rightly said, they are the people that you do not know. They're the ones to watch.
Yeah, they definitely are. And for like runtime's sake, we're trying to keep it like an hour and a half. So for the let's say the final bit, let's dive into what is pretty much also the meat and bones of Tartaria: free energy, and harvesting energy from the ether, or from the earth itself. You mentioned Nikola Tesla before, and it sounds like you and this is just mere observation, that you don't think he's credible? That you think he is just another puppet, another, you know, plant, perhaps, or not credible at the very least. So, what is your opinion on free energy? Is free energy a thing? Do we harvest it from the earth? Do we harvest it from the ether? Was Nikola Tesla right, or is he, really as cuckoo as he is? As he is right?
Okay, so with regard to harnessing energy from the ether, yes, I think that that's possible. I think that often when I look at pylons, electricity pylons, I see what appears to be a very basic version of a Tesla tower. So yes, by using the ether, they're harnessing energy that then creates electricity. And the cathedrals, for example, we've mentioned them a couple of times, are a good example of that. Cathode row, so the storing and harnessing of energy. For anybody that wants to see it in action, a good example would be to watch Back to the Future, where they wire the clock tower up to the DeLorean. So when it gets hit by a lightning strike, they're using the Earth's natural energy to actually charge something powerful enough to send somebody back in time. So we've had it in plain sight. There's also the story of Benjamin Franklin making a kite and the strings saline solution on it, and he discovers electricity or whatever. So we know that we can also produce electricity ourselves. That all life requires a spark. Even in IVF treatment, and certain medical procedures, electricity is involved. A short burst of electricity, even restarting your heart. So we know that we have electricity in us. We carry static in us. There's static in the atmosphere, and it's produced, they say, by the charge between the North and the South Pole. And if you can harness that energy and then store that in a tank filled with copper, copper cable, wound in red mercury, that then harnesses it, and that can be used to power anything at all. So we've got this theory that Tesla makes this tower, and he's then going to bounce this energy from one place to another. So the tower receives the energy, it then transmits to another smaller tower, and so on. And then anything in between that can pick up and use that energy. So yes, energy being harnessed from the ether. He succeeded in being able to demonstrate how that worked, and then JP Morgan pulls the funding. So Tesla himself, though, well, first of all, I understand his name isn't English, but his surname fascinates me because it's an anagram of steal, as in theft. And because I've argued for a very long time that Nikola Tesla, if he existed, was reverse engineering Tartarian technology. Now, if that is the case, where was he getting the information from? What did he find, or who was sharing this stuff with him? Alternatively, he never actually existed. There are only a few photographs in circulation of him. We always see the same ones, a side profile and then him as an old man looking frail. There's very little in between. There are long periods of time where he does nothing. And even his own museum have no video footage of him at all. Not a single piece of video footage exists anywhere in the world of Nikola Tesla. No one can find any. Now, I was told by the museum that might be because he was camera shy. Yet this man was supposed to be on the circuit doing after dinner talks. Everybody wanted him at dinner parties. He was on stage announcing all of his inventions all the time. He says that everything came to him in a vision, so he never had to write anything down. Yet when he dies, all of his life's work, all of his research, all these documents are taken from his hotel rooms. He had 2 hotel rooms, 33rd floor hotel in New York. Everybody knows the story. What did they take if he never wrote anything down? Where did he get the information from that changed the course of history? Where? So he was either being fed this stuff, and he said that it was the Venetians that were telling him all of this information through visions, and that actually he was from Venus. Why is it that we can't find any video footage of him anywhere? Now, did he exist or didn't he? We don't know. Now, I've been told by someone who claimed to be his granddaughter. Now, he never married, that was a bit iffy to start with. He never even had sex, along with like Albert Einstein. I was then contacted, who swore blind that I knew him, I remembered him. Then his great nephew contacted me and said that she remembered him when she was little. I then probed and asked a few questions. She said that the new president of the United States of America wouldn't allow her to divulge anything further with me. So I realised then that she was absolutely barking mad. And I question, why are there no people out there that descend? How come none of his nieces, nephews, great nieces and great nephews, why aren't they out there? Why aren't they talking? Why aren't they saying anything? Because people are questioning whether or not he existed. A little bit like they do Napoleon and William Shakespeare. People have been questioning their existence for a long time. So if Nikola Tesla did exist, he was getting the information from somewhere. God knows where. But the things that he was focusing on, and his life's work really was the transmission of wireless energy. That was what, he even fooled Morgan into thinking that was really all he was, that he was no longer doing that he was going to work on radio transmission so JP Morgan could control the news and the speed that it travels around the world. But secretly, he's still carrying on trying to transmit energy wirelessly. Why? Why did that become his obsession? He has to have seen that somewhere before or have been given the blueprint to do that. Otherwise, he wouldn't even begin to understand why or how to make this work. So, that's my issue with him. If he did exist, where was he getting this information from? And if he didn't exist, who was introducing this tech and how are they doing it? So I just don't know. But it would help if someone could provide me with video footage of him. There's also another thing with Tesla that links him to Frank Zappa, John G. Trump, Elon Musk, Donald Trump and Barron Trump and a man called Ingersoll Lockwood. They are all connected in something that's really screwed up as well that I can't get my head around. Do you want me to tell you it as quickly as I can?
Yeah,
so,
go for it.
Ingersoll Lockwood, over 100 years ago, writes 3 books. One of them is The Last President, one of them is The Adventures of Barron Trump, and then one's Marvelous Underground Journey or something with my dog. In that, you've got this Barron Trump. His advisor, the person that guides him throughout the story, is Don, and he lives in Castle Trump. Well, Donald Trump, obviously, he's before it was called the Trump Towers, it was called Castle Trump. His son's called Barron. We all know this. So Ingersoll Lockwood writes this book, and in it talks about the last president as well, and stating that there's going to be a situation in New York. Someone's going to come in that's a bit controversial. They'll be the last president because then it's going to change. Well, he's been on about doing that already. So you've then got Nikola Tesla die. John G. Trump goes into the hotel room, takes all of the files and hands them over to the FBI. All but 3. The 3 keeps are to do with time travel. Now, it says that apparently they were all put into a warehouse, 2 truckloads into a warehouse in New York, unknown location. But these 3 never materialized. Now, some conspiracy researchers say that Tesla went back, brought a younger self version of himself back to the future with him, and that became Frank Zappa. And all the images we see of Tesla are Frank Zappa. That's who it is that we're looking at. And that was who that was brought forward. And that Barron Trump, Donald Trump's son, is a time traveller, and that he has the information that was passed to him by John G. Trump through Tesla, Nikola Tesla. And Barron Trump is the one that we're supposed to be keeping a very close eye on. And that man is travelling backwards and forwards in time using Tesla's research, and that the books that came out actually predicted the future. They didn't even sell very well at the time when they were published. Very few people bought them. They boomed when Trump got into office for the very first time. So there is an alternative argument, and that is that those books aren't as old as we've been told. They came out when Trump ran for office the first time to give him one hell of a bit of marketing out there, because now lots of people have heard of those stories and they hadn't before. So there you go. That's the connection. They reckon that Baron Trump has been time travelling. He's not the son of Donald Trump at all. He's somehow connected to Nikola Tesla, and that Frank Zappa was an experiment in using frequency in music, and that was Tesla. That's the man that we're looking at. And if you look at photographs of them both, you'll see. So Nikola Tesla never existed.
Yeah.
Frank Zappa is Nikola Tesla and was playing him, and all of the information out there is all just bullshit. And it just depends where you sit.
Definitely. You look at Baron Trump and he has got an air about him. And people seem to be very wary of him. When you saw him at the inauguration, people were very wary of him. And whatever he said to Biden made Biden completely change his face. So there is an air about Baron Trump. So you just don't know these days, do you?
No, and he is very, very confident. His Russian accent's gone, which he had when he was a child. When he was little, his height wasn't. No one said for at any point was he growing, significantly taller than a child would be for that age. There's something else going on here. They also, his dad said that he is genetically superior to other people, and his own school said that they hadn't come across anybody before that was that intelligent. It almost like he was a different being entirely. So there's stuff going on there that we just don't understand. But it could well. Let's look at Elon Musk, for example. Now, this man, having watched him for years now on different TV channels, news bulletins, podcasts, he is not super intelligent. At no point have I seen him come across as being intelligent. So what's going on there?
Well, he's constantly orbiting a K-hole. He's on a lot of ketamine.
Wouldn't surprise me. But there's something that man, how did he get to become the wealthiest person in the world, when clearly he's not the most intelligent, but we're supposed to believe he is? Some sort of like technological whiz kid? Is he talking to aliens? Where's he get all this tech from and his ideas from? Why is he desperate to try and break through the firmament in his little rockets? What's he all about? Well, I think that he's another Nikola Tesla. They've just stuck somebody there that kind of has a background in it all, but someone who'll do what they're told. What even is he? He's a very strange character.
Very strange, very strange.
Yeah, and a lot of what he says doesn't make sense. He doesn't come. He comes across as being relatively intelligent. I'm sure he's a lot more intelligent than I am, and quite witty, but not the sort of person that's making groundbreaking technology. That's not the person that I see when I hear him talk.
No, you don't. When he's doing these presentations, he doesn't go in depth of anything that he's made. He's very surface level, very, very surface. He's more, like you say, like the publicity guy rather than the brains behind whatever's going on, that kind of thing. He definitely comes across as that.
So it's just another one of those weird situations, to me. Nikola Tesla, Elon Musk, these people seem very similar to me. The information's fed from somewhere else. Are these just frontmen? Are we looking at just an actor? Is that all we've ever been looking at?
Wasn't it the book from either from Werner von Braun or him about Mars and the first Martian colony, and that the first king of Mars would be called Elon?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So what is this? What's going on here? Are they just giving us what we need? Are we supposed to find these connections? Because not many people know about that book by Warner von Braun. Not a lot of people know he even wrote it, even wrote a book. But there's something there. This is not coincidence, is it? There's too much going on, and the names are too random. Like Warner von Braun picking Elon and picking Mars, and Musk's obsession with Mars and trying to get there. I mean, what's wrong with here? Why does he need to go there? What is going on?
Because we're destroying the planet, and Mars is, I don't know, a good second home if we can cultivate it.
Why would we do that?
It supposedly had an atmosphere once upon a time, and we can do it again with all the billions from Elon, supposedly. I don't know. I don't get it. It's a suicide mission at best.
Yeah, I think that is strange. I think because if you had all the power and the technology and the money in the world, why would you go up? I'd go down. I would go down. Let's talk about Agartha, or let's go into the sea and build something in the sea. Then it doesn't matter what's going on above. It's going to survive anything, isn't it? It doesn't. The whole bloody world can catch on fire. But if you're 20,000 leagues under the sea, then you're going to be all right, aren't you? So I don't understand the fascination. I think it's all distraction. While he's trying to get to Mars, we've got the most intelligent, techie, and most powerful, wealthiest man in the world showing us that we're going to get to Mars and we're going to start a colony on Mars. And that's pleasing and satisfying to all the people that buy into that. Whereas I don't think that we can get out of this place. I think we're in some sort of snow globe, and there's it's just not possible. I think it's a closed environment, and we're not going anywhere. And the secret is we go down to go anywhere. We go tunnels. I don't know if there is an ice wall. I imagine it's under it to get through and not over it. We just don't know for certain any of this stuff, but I think trying to get to Mars is just misdirection for us. A huge distraction.
Just on that going down, it brings back the levels of existence thing that they used to talk about in old days, where the underworld, so to say, and people live on different levels of existence. Maybe that's the kind of thing that we actually live in.
Kabbalah.
We're on this level,
Kabbalistic
but there are
tree.
levels underneath us that we need to get to, possibly, to advance.
Also very reminiscent of Dante's Inferno, the 7 layers of hell.
Exactly, yeah.
And of heaven. There are many theories, many speculations. You can take it from all kinds of angles, and hey, maybe that's a good one for a follow-up, going into Agartha, Hollow Earth, Admiral Byrd finding an entrance in the South Pole, was it? And now it's a no-fly zone, and maybe for a follow-up, going from the surface, going deeper. Literally going deeper.
I think with all of we have been told for so long about the South Pole and what's going on there and possible underground bases and so on. And they've got the treaty, haven't they, that we're not allowed to just rock up. We can't even get near it. And you can pay an awful lot of money to go on little bits of it and certain parts of it, but we can't actually fly over it. We can't really explore. And I think the reason for all of that is because it's going on at the North Pole. Whenever they tell us to look up, look down. If they tell us to look south, look north.
I mean,
that's the other one into, yeah.
That's a given. If they tell you one thing, do the other. If they tell you to look left, look right. It's...
So I think if we're looking for a portal, if we're looking for a way to Agartha or some sort of vortex, I think we need to be looking at the North Pole. That has got to be where we should be looking, because we're told to look and worry about what's going on in Antarctica. I think because of that, it's all happening at the North Pole.
That's also how the magnetic field goes, right? The toroidal field
Yeah.
goes from the top
Yeah.
down. So why would it be the South Pole? That would be the exit.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And again, you've got the same restrictions there, the same restrictions in place. You can't fly over it, you can't go near it. I think that's where we need to be looking. There's something the other side of that. I don't know what, but there's something going on there. We need to go check it out.
Yeah,
So then with
Elon's
the
just
South
said he's
Pole-
flown over it, hasn't he? But the photograph that he released just had nothing on it.
Hmm.
There was nothing at all on it.
So would
That was
then
in the
the
past
whole
few
South
weeks.
Pole thing just be the distraction from the North Pole, like keeping us so obsessed with the South Pole and whatever is going on there that, you know, we don't look at the North?
Yeah, I'm sure I have no doubt there's stuff going on everywhere. But for me, the obsession with us now thinking about it being an entrance to other unknown lands and an entrance to Agartha and the possibility that there was a Nazi base there. My gut is that because there's so much attention there that it's misdirection. There's something going on at the North Pole. We need to work out what that is.
Well,
Get 80% of the people focusing on the South Pole, and then it might be easier for 20% of us to find out what's going on in the North and maybe check it out.
Yeah.
well, who knows? And you know, like the Nazi bases and everything. Like from Germany, it's a lot easier to get to the North Pole than to the South Pole. So, you know, and the Germans are nothing if not efficient.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, well, something for a follow up episode, because I think, you know, Agartha, Hollow Earth theory. There's a lot to that as well. You know, also kind of connecting to Tartaria, of course, if we're talking about, you know, buried cities, if we're talking about mud floods, you know, everything is underground. Our past is buried beneath our feet, and I just read in the book that I'm doing for the book club on my own channel that possibly the reason why so many archaeologists say that, like, oh, everything is burial, everything's a burial mound, everything is a burial place, is to tell us that our past is dead and buried. So there's no need to really pay attention to that.
Yeah, I agree.
Definitely. Definitely. Should we wrap it up there? We've done an hour and a half.
Yeah. Andy, any final words? Any final questions, remarks?
It's just the topic. I always thought it was just lost empires, lost civilizations, but when I've listened to Guy's book, it opens up avenues that go into lots of other conspiracy theories, so many others. It just fires off in all these different directions. And to just say, oh, Tartaria is this one, free energy is this one, this is this one, it just doesn't comprehend. It's all connected, it's all in this web, and it is just connecting those dots. We're on dot number 6, and there's another million dots to go. Is that the kind of way I look at it? It's just progressing all the way through there.
Absolutely. And speaking of the book, Mr. Anderson, I had to. I'm sorry. I had to.
That's all right. My
I've been
eldest son,
doing that one for you.
He's been waiting for that.
eldest son's called Tom, so you know my eldest son is Tom Anderson, and yes, it's something that it's good though, isn't it? Yeah, I'm grateful for my surname, and I only got it because my nan remarried when my dad was late teens. He wasn't even going to change his surname; it was going to be McDonald. So I'm grateful. I'm grateful, Nan. Thank you for doing that.
You would have been
Yeah.
Old MacDonald.
Yeah, exactly, and nobody wants that.
No.
Yeah. So
Speaking of the book, where can the people find it? Where may the people purchase it to read all about it?
well, I published it through Amazon. Nobody would publish it. due to the content potentially being harmful. No one would go anywhere near it. And then I contacted a couple of big ones that turned out to be Masonic publishing houses. So I had to use Amazon. So you can get it on there. It's available as hardback, paperback, Kindle, and audiobook. But I send out signed copies. Literally every week I send out signed copies all over the world. So they can email me. They can contact me through Facebook, however they want to. You know, and I can get them shipped out. But I've sent them everywhere, all over the place. A bookshop in India, a bookshop in Norway. I've sent boxes of books out and sat there and signed them all. But yeah, every week I probably send 20 or 30 copies across the world, and I've been doing that since it came out last August. So wherever you are, if you want to sign one, then give me a shout or jump on Amazon. I think there are some places where you can't, where Amazon won't work, so they often contact me directly. But yeah, just get in touch.
Well, I'm sure Andy will have all the links. We'll make sure that they are available in the description of both the video and audio, of course. So yeah, Guy, thank you very much for coming on. We touched on a lot, and I hope that for everyone watching, for everyone listening, you at least got a idea of what Tartaria is, what it might be, or possibly what it isn't at all. So thank you very much for listening once more to Across the Pond. I've been Stein Fox here with the Hat Honcho Doctor, not as evil.
Thank you.
And of course the Tartaria guy himself, Guy Anderson. We thank you all for watching. We thank you all for listening. Do remember to like, share, subscribe. If you are listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, do leave us that 5-star rating. If AI is gonna take over, then at least be this one. Let this be one of the podcasts that it pushes out. A little truth in the dystopian world. Yeah, thank you all very much. We will be back soon with more amazing content. In the meantime, do check out all the other episodes that we have done. There is so much that we have covered, so much that we will cover. And yeah, tips are always welcome. Things that you want to hear, things that you want us to cover. I think I've blabbered long enough for now. I thank you all. Until next time, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thanks for having me on.